Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Fergal Armstrong, and welcome to Cracking Addiction. And once again, we have with us the good Mr. Stephen Hurd. Hello, Steve. How are you?
I'm really well, thanks, Fergal. Thanks for having me back again.
I'm very pleased to have you back. So, I thought today we'd have a little chat about the intersection between AOD and family violence. What are your immediate thoughts to that?
Immediate thoughts. It's actually a big topic, but I guess my immediate thoughts are uh, around things like causation, I guess.
Yeah.
Does AOD cause family violence?
Or
Or
does family violence cause AOD?
yeah. Well, that's the other way to look at it. That's the other way to look at it, of course. Um, and
Or is AOD a tool for family violence?
it's a tool for family violence, and it's also a coping strategy for family violence.
So it's a
Exactly
tool, it's
right.
a coping strategy,
Yeah.
and does it cause family violence?
Well, if it did cause family violence, what do you reckon? If we just stopped AOD use altogether, then family violence would
Well, I mean
disappear
that's
as well.
that's a fabulous line, isn't it? If we stopped AOD use,
Mm,
we would solve so many problems in this world.
mm,
First of all, I don't think it's possible to stop AOD use. And secondly, I don't believe that stopping AOD use, certainly in the case of family violence, I don't believe that stopping AOD use would stop family violence because remember, family violence is all about choices and control. People choose to use family violence. And I think the people who choose to use family violence, and that itself, by the way, that's just triggered another thought. People who choose to use family violence is also the more received synonym for perpetrators of family violence, isn't it? So people who choose to use family violence will use family violence irrespective of their mental state. I mean, intoxication may worsen the impulsivity, but there is still an underlying choice. What do you think? Well, that's my opinion. What do you think?
that's right. Yeah, but we certainly know a few things, and that is family violence exists without alcohol and other drug involvement,
Yeah.
and that's well known. We also know family violence isn't just a one-off incident, and we might see conflict on the news or whatever between a couple reported, where say ice might have been involved, and we say, oh, it's clearly the ice that caused the conflict. But we know that family violence is a long-term set of behaviours, not just a one-off incident. So when it comes to assessing the involvement of substances, we really have to look at a broader picture.
So let's explore the breadth of that broader picture. Well, when you say we have to look at the broader picture, let's look at that in more detail.
Yeah, yeah. The nature of family violence, as we've talked about in a couple of episodes ago, is over a long term of having power and control over the partner. Typically, a male partner wanting to control his female partner, and you conceptualize that as treating the female partner as an object and just a
Mm,
possession, and that's a really useful and simple way of looking at it
mm.
for a lot of good reasons.
Now,
When
when people start treating other people as possessions or objects, that to me immediately triggers the concept of psychopath.
Okay,
That's what psychopaths
could
do.
well do, could well do.
Am I
Okay,
saying that all people who use family violence are psychopaths? Probably not. I'm not
probably not.
saying that, but
No.
makes you think.
Well, it triggers a lot of thoughts now around different personalities and the different strategies that there exist to control another person based on, in my understanding, that is based on the skills and personality of the person involved.
Yeah,
Narcissism, being a psychopath, antisocial behaviour,
yeah,
lack of empathy,
yeah,
my own level of cognitive ability, my
yeah.
own IQ, so to speak, my
Uh,
wealth, my
on
education.
that note, does IQ increase or decrease or affect at all the risk of family violence? Do you think?
Oh, I haven't read anything separately, but I would say it would just be across the board. But
Yeah.
certainly when it comes to disability,
Mm.
people with disability, and it's a general statement, and I would say probably applies to people with intellectual disability, that there's a much greater chance for people with a disability to experience family violence
Yes.
than to use family violence. So that
And
is
to use family violence.
or than to use family
Oh,
violence.
than to use, right, yeah. So if
So
you're
there's more chance
disabled in
of
any
being a
way,
victim.
yeah, definitely, yeah.
Whereas
I mean,
we see mental health issues and concerns as being so chaotic and problematic to ourselves as individuals, we think, oh, well, they're obviously the problem. But often people with disabilities, well, most of the time, people with disabilities are the victim.
yeah. So you've just triggered in me this idea of, what are the risk factors for violence? I'm not talking specifically about family violence, but for me, psychological risk factors for violence per se include a history of previous violence, being male, being an adult rather than under the age of 18, having a low IQ, being estranged, and being substance affected. So for me, estrangement and low IQ and substance affected, those are really quite telling. Because again, it talks to, I mean, if you're at risk of violence, then surely you're also at risk of family violence. So I wondered to what extent do those risk factors apply to family violence. And then I suppose it goes back to the original opening statement, the intersection between AOD and family violence. So it does, so go on.
Yeah, just let's address that risk factors for using violence. The evidence really says that it is around gender inequality. It is a gender
Simple as
thing.
that.
It's as simple as that. It's about having attitudes that this other person is less powerful than me. If you can imagine an array of a graph,
right?
We've got a graph, and we've got an individual sense of power in society, and we all appear as a little dot somewhere there, across here. We all appear as a little dot. So my humble and popular sort of notion to myself is that people who want to use family violence do so or identify people with lower power, and they can use their power over them. That their strategies, their tools, their personality inputs, and their gender preferences will attract them to someone with lower power.
That's fascinating. So even before marriage, during the courtship, the dating game, when you're choosing prospective mates, as it were, when you're prospective long-term relationships, you gravitate, if you're someone who's going to engage in family violence, you gravitate to those whom you perceive to be weaker than yourself.
Yes, and that sort of helps guarantee success.
So therefore, can the opposite of that be also true, that people who feel themselves to be weak, are they themselves more at risk of being the victims of family violence?
In that model, they probably would, but other skills come into play.
Oh, do tell.
Pardon?
Do tell. Other skills come into play. Do tell.
Well, it's about the specific opportunities of how people intersect.
Right.
How a person, let's say a male perpetrator, might groom a prospective partner,
right,
and he gets flipped off by 9 out of 10.
Right.
But that 1 in 10 gets attracted for some reason.
Right.
And I guess on that side of the fence, my corollary is that some partners, and this sort of relates to why people might choose to stay in relationships, is that it's safer to be with someone you know rather than be out in the street. And that actually reminds me of an exact statement from a client that we had, a female client we had, who said exactly that she'd prefer to sustain the beatings that she had on a regular basis, once a week or so, interspersed with calm, but that was better than being homeless. And your sort of heart goes out, it sort of makes you stop and think as to what this power of family violence has over that individual, and then how often that situation occurs in our society. But the nature of a woman needing to be protected by her partner and being protected from other perpetrators, from other predators.
So I think it's really important at this point just to emphasize, though, that at no point are we in any way victim blaming.
That's exactly right.
And basically, the only person who's responsible for family violence is the perpetrator of family violence.
That's right.
Yeah, let's just be absolutely clear about that.
Yeah, I hope my language reflects that.
Yeah.
It's about the active choices that someone makes to provide safety for themselves. And staying in an abusive relationship may be safer for them than the alternate.
Yeah.
And we can only just sort of help to support that situation better, identify and focus on the behaviours of the perpetrator, make that more visible, and make them more accountable.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. I remember that there was a book out in the 70s or 80s, I think, that I happened to read. It was called Prone to Violence. And it tried to set the case for why women were in abusive relationships. This is in the sort of the early stages of us thinking about what family violence is about. And it came up with this notion of, well, some women are just prone to violence. They're just prone to going into abusive relationships, which really means we're victim blaming and we're allowing the perpetrators to get away with what they get away with.
Yeah. The phrase, they bring it on themselves, I've heard that said. And that's just absolutely not true. We do not support that point of view at all.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I guess we also look at where alcohol, for instance, no? If we sort of get back to we drifted off topic a bit, but how alcohol plays a part in both the perpetration and the victim status of a relationship or in a
right. So, well, have we finally decided, does alcohol increase the risk of family violence on the part of the perpetrator?
What it does do, it increases the frequency and severity.
Right.
And in studies with alcohol, it says even on the day of consumption, increases the risk that there's going to be significant physical violence.
Right. So it doesn't cause it, but it increases the frequency and the severity.
And in my immense behaviour change programs, I used to explain that in terms of sort of like a magnifying glass.
Yeah.
On the person, and it just makes bigger what those beliefs or insecurities or those attitudes are, and disinhibits. And it certainly does other biological functions around reducing ability to self-regulate and in the moment and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But then we look back, we can step back though and say, well, actually there's a whole pathway to consuming alcohol, to getting intoxicated, to a point where it gives permission to that person to use violence and subsequently blame the alcohol for that.
Tell me more about that. Give us some examples in your experience.
I think it's all sort of accessible now, I guess. There's a phrase we've probably heard a lot of on the news around alcohol fuel violence.
Yes.
And it sort of tells us, it's alcohol fuel violence. Alcohol's to blame.
Alcohol was to blame. And
so we get messages from news on a nightly basis that substances cause violence, and we can relate that in our simple way to family violence. We see family violence as physical incidents and that kind of thing, and then when alcohol is involved, we default to saying alcohol is a problem. And then
why do people say alcohol is a problem?
Well,
why do perpetrators say alcohol is a problem?
Well, it's much easier to blame this other thing and look outward than look inward.
So it's a deflection of responsibility, isn't it?
It absolves me of my responsibility of maintaining my my mutually respectful relationship.
Yeah. And it also
gives me permission to...
It also hides or obscures the fact, and I go back to this point, that family violence is a choice. Yeah.
That's right. And we try and disguise it to say, well, I was drunk.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened. I blacked out.
Yeah. You said something to me there, though, that I thought we need to explore a bit more. You said that the decision to get intoxicated isn't spontaneous, or I paraphrase that, but there are choices. There's a series of choices that lead towards being intoxicated and lead towards family violence. Can we explore those a little bit?
Yeah. We've sort of got to step back in that sort of decision-making process and permission-granting process, I guess. And certainly when these events occur over and over again, and I get drunk, use violence, blackout, can't remember, try to get be made accountable by my partner or friends or family or broader systems, then it continues. So at what point is that individual going to then say, well, I'm actually making decisions to have more substances and I know what the outcome's going to be. Maybe the first time it was all brand new territory. However, it doesn't take too many reoccurrences to really say, well, this is a pattern. Yeah. And there are choices there. Knowing all too well what the outcome's going to be.
Yeah. And I suppose really it reflects back to, the AOD counselling point of view, where certainly when we're talking about relapse prevention, people give themselves permission to relapse long before the relapse occurs. So actually, relapse starts in the head before it starts in the bottle.
And I guess there's this inflated, on the family violence front, there's this inflated view of self to say I can manage it.
Yeah.
I control it. It doesn't control me.
Yeah. I mean, there are others that might describe people who believe that they can control their substance uses or their alcohol consumption as the dry drunk. Is that denial? Where you are currently sober, but you're in denial about the power that the substance has over you. I wonder if there's a correlation between the dry drunk and family violence.
Interesting. I'm not sure if I've heard that phrase, but that'd be interesting to explore.
People... Sorry, go on.
Yeah. I was going to look on the flip side.
All right.
What if a victim's drunk?
Well, I think we should... we need to explore the effects of substances on the victim, perhaps in another episode. We perhaps in this episode, we are running out of time. We're going to have to think about how we conclude this issue around how substances affect the perpetrator.
And I guess just to wrap that up is that we really separate the substances from the family violence behaviour. And the responsibility for the violence is within the person, not within the substance. Though substances play a part in severity and frequency. That's the common understanding in modern research.
On that sweet note, Stephen, I think we're going to have to call it for today. Thank you so much for your pearls of wisdom.
Thanks, Fergal. Next time.
That's all for today, folks. My name's Dr. Fergal Armstrong, and this has been Cracking Addiction.